Hello, everybody. It is November 25th, 2025, here in the United States of America. And in tonight's video, I'm going to talk about the newly elected mayor of New York City, Zohran Mamdani, and why he made a recent trip to the White House to meet with President Donald J. Trump, and why I think this was a very politically shrewd and good idea on his part. So, the newly elected mayor of New York, Zohran Mamdani, is a member of the Democratic Party and also a member of the Democratic Socialist Party of America. The man is a self-described socialist. He subscribes, at least publicly, to much of left-wing activism orthodoxy, or the orthodox beliefs of left-wing activism, I would say. He has called Trump a fascist. He has challenged President Trump to send his ICE agents into New York City, where he has stated that he would fight back against Trump's immigration policies, and has also threatened to arrest the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, if Benjamin Netanyahu ever were to step foot in New York City. Now, despite all of this very strong rhetoric against the president, him openly challenging the president and his campaign speeches leading up to the election, after he was elected mayor of New York City, he made a very quick trip to the White House to meet with the man he calls a fascist dictator that he would fight back against, using all of his capacity to do so. Why did he meet with President Trump? Well, it's a smart thing to do. Much of, I think, the public rhetoric from Zohran Mamdani, and I'm not a fan of him politically, just to put that out there. Not really my cup of tea, but isn't this a cool mug, though? Yeah, that's pretty neat, isn't it? It's a really old mug that I actually got from my church. It's got a little Orthodox cross on it. It's pretty cool. Anyways, now this meeting would have has likely disappointed many of Zohran Mamdani's supporters. You know, they're asking themselves, well, why would he meet with someone he calls, a fascist? Why would he meet with, literally Hitler? Why would he go to the White House to play nice with the most evil man in American history? Why would he do such a thing? And I'm sure they're upset about this and wondering why, if they've been lied to. I'd say in some capacity, yes. Zohran Mamdani, at the end of the day, is a politician, even if he has some revolutionary leanings, and he's going to say and do whatever gives him a political edge and whatever endeavor he's partaking in. And pandering to the young revolutionary base of the Democratic Party is, if you're in that party and you're running for office and you're depending on them for your votes, especially in a very large urban area like New York City, it's simply smart politics to pander to them. Now, does it hurt the Democratic Party as a whole to pander to these people, especially outside of large urban areas that they need to win over voters? And yeah, it absolutely does, because these revolutionary politics aren't nearly as popular as some people may believe them to be, especially when you talk to the average rank-and-file, blue-collar American. But, like I said, despite all that, Zohran Mamdani flew to the White House to meet with President Donald J. Trump. And they apparently had a conversation about things that they agreed on, things that they would cooperate on, things they could work together on. Now, why was it a smart move on Mr. Mamdani's part? President Trump is the most powerful politician in the country. He generally calls the shots. He doesn't seem to back down from anything unless the courts force him to do so, and Trump is very adamant about implementing his domestic policy here in the United States. So it's not really to Zohran Mamdani's advantage, especially if he wants to improve the lives of people in New York City, to constantly butt heads with the president and not have some kind of civil relationship with him. Now, the truth is, if Zohran Mamdani really thought that President Trump was actually Hitler and the most evil man in the country, he wouldn't have met with him. Frankly, he doesn't believe that. There's no way that he believes that. He's probably much more of a pragmatist that he leads on. I'd say he's I'm not saying the man's a centrist. I mean, he's still a democratic socialist and still a left-wing candidate, a very obviously left-wing person. That being said, though, he's a smart and shrewd politician, and I actually do believe that he intends to gain as much support in New York City as possible. I don't think he intends to just govern for the left-wing activists that are in New York. And although he's made some, I would say, foolish comments in the past about making sure that white neighborhoods get taxed more, I don't see him following through on something like that, because it would be an extremely unpopular and inflammatory policy, and actually would probably hurt his future political prospects, especially at a time where many Americans are starting to rapidly become disenfranchised with both political parties, and the message that both political parties seem to be pushing. I don't think many of these policies are as popular as they were prior to 2020, because they have gotten so much pushback by so many prominent figures. It'd be a stupid move for him politically to follow through on something like that. I do expect him to moderate to some degree. There are plenty of people within New York City that are worried, concerned about his policies, especially if he becomes Gavin Newsom 2.0, where he is using public funds that are desperately needed for other things to, I would say, give non-citizens health insurance. That wouldn't be a popular move. I don't expect him to do that. One thing I'm actually surprised by, though, is that he still continues to call Trump a fascist even after meeting with him. And again, that's just to pander to his base. But I will say this to any politician running as a Democrat: stop using these meaningless buzzwords. Stop calling people fascists. Stop calling people racists. Stop calling people misogynists. Stop calling people ists across the board. These words have no meaning at this point. We can't perpetually live in 1938. I think most Americans now view, like, when somebody's called a fascist, they sort of just roll their eyes and go, okay, sure. This isn't the 1930s. This person isn't a member of an actual fascist party that adheres to fascist ideology. Now, if he wants to use, the phrase authoritarian, President Trump is very Caesar-like and authoritarian in some aspects, according to many people, then okay, use that. Stop using these loaded buzzwords. It's doing nothing but hurting, I would say, his prospects of becoming, a popular political figure in New York. And I think he would be much better served if he would stop using such rhetoric, as would most, progressive or liberal politicians. And again, this is just a pander to the revolutionary young voting base, these college students. But at the end of the day, I've mentioned before in previous videos, these people are becoming a political hindrance to the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party needs to move back towards trying to win over the average American blue-collar worker. This is their, if they want to remain a viable political party, now that so many Americans have become disenfranchised with the two-party system, that is the direction they need to go. And I would advise Mr. Mamdani, especially after his meeting with President Trump, where he showed a willingness to work with President Trump, that if he really wants to further his political career, I would say that he needs to start directly addressing the needs of his more blue-collar working class constituents. Believe it or not, there are plenty of people within New York City that aren't millionaires and billionaires. And I think that's a lot of aspiring politicians in the United States are going to find themselves in such a situation where, if they really wish to have any kind of success in the American political system, then they really need to start addressing a wider spectrum of Americans, not just this political revolutionary class that's in our colleges, because they're not going to carry anyone to an electoral victory at this point. And one of the reasons why Zohran Mamdani won in the first place was because he ran against Andrew Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo is not exactly popular. The former mayor, Eric Adams, wasn't exactly popular. He wasn't really running against anyone that I would say had any real weight with New Yorkers. He probably seemed like to the average person who's not really entrenched in the politics of Twitter and social media. He probably listened to a few things he said and thought, well, okay, we'll give this guy a shot. How couldn't get any worse, could it? And not every American hears the word socialist and automatically thinks of Cold War, or the Reds marching down the streets to overthrow the government and implement their communist utopia. Again, like when it comes to things like socialism, it's starting to become an empty buzzword to a lot of people. When somebody gets accused of being a socialist, and a lot of this is kind of falls at the feet of the Republican Party, because they use the term for pretty much anything they don't like, any kind of publicly funded thing. When it comes to like healthcare, infrastructure, like social safety nets, they just say socialism, 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 socialism. Like, well, no, many of these policies have been things that governments have done since there have been governments, because governments have tended to put the welfare of their citizens somewhere within their agenda, because it ensures prosperity and relative stability. I mean, the Romans had plenty of public works projects, ways to keep their citizens happy. Occasionally, government figures would pay people's rents, debts. Yeah, and these were political bribes, but they worked. They relieved certain social tensions and pressures. And Rome had a grain dole for its citizens to ensure that famines didn't happen. And these things weren't called socialism back then. It was just called competent governing. And yes, absolutely, I think communism is not a great ideology and shouldn't be embraced. But not every single social program should be labeled as socialism. It's not really helpful, especially when so many Americans are actually struggling to make ends meet. They would gladly accept help if they could. And I think that's one of the reasons why Mr. Mamdani, despite being called a socialist and a Marxist and whatnot, still had so much appeal within New York City. And I would say he needs to take advantage of that while he can, and try to broaden that appeal to working class, blue collar people, if he wants to have a successful political career. But time will tell. We'll see if he does that, or he stays entrenched in revolutionary circles and beats his head off the wall, and continues to call President Trump a fascist and destroy any kind of positive relationship he could have with him. But we'll see what happens. Anyways, that's all I really wanted to talk about tonight. I will be back later this week with another video. If this is your first time watching any content on this channel, please, if you did enjoy this video, like this video and subscribe to my channel. And any feedback in the comment section about something I could talk about, maybe something that could have been better delivered on, disagreements even, please keep it civil and respectful. Feel free to comment and tell me how you feel. But anyways, everyone out there, have a great night, and until next time.